All right, welcome everybody. We are here for our live objection handling fishbowl class. So we're going to be going through some different scenarios. And while I just allow a couple people to filter in and get started, I'll let our recorded audience know what we're going to be working on today. So this was born out of a need because we had a lot of agents who were struggling with those inside of the call conversations. We have our openings that we work on. We have our closing for appointments and things like that. But inside of that, everything gets brought up, right? Buyer hesitations, seller hesitations, investor hesitations. There are some that are quick one-off objections that we need to be able to handle. There are some that are a little more complex. And so what I'm going to walk through here, whether we have an active participative base or not, I'm going to go through a number of these and just go through how I would handle them. Now, I'm hoping that we are able to get some other folks to help out with this and things like that, because I always think it's a little bit of a better lively discussion when we can go that route. But I'm hoping that this will be helpful for us to go through and just understand what are some of the basic ways we can sort of start framing a conversation. Now, I will preface this by giving you a smidge of my background. I have been a realtor for 10 years. I am by no means a market level expert in these things. I feel as though I have a decent way of navigating a lot of these concerns and at least being able to set up some of the soft framework for a conversation of how to work through things and how to use your tone and how to use kind of some small visual aids to work through these things. But I'm open to feedback. So if you're watching this on a recording, if you want to comment on the videos, if you want to engage at any point with me and ask me about some different scenarios that you've come up with, I am more than happy to do that with you. So we are going to go ahead and get started here as we jump in. So let's start with this. I've broken this into three sections. We have some very simple objection handlers. I then have about 15 slightly more complex ones. Now, I don't know if we're going to get through all of these. I just want to give you the setup. But then I also have 5 scenarios, much more complex, a lot of moving parts. And you have to be able to navigate that and be able to keep your client moving forward in the transaction or respect the fact that they may need to come out of it. So if I'm going to be doing this kind of by myself, I'm going to have to kind of play both sides of this. But let's start jumping into a couple of these. All right. So let's talk about the buyer hesitations at the moment. So there's a few in here that we're looking at that I want to kind of pull out. There's a few. I'm worried the market will crash after I buy. I need to sell my home first before I can buy. I want to wait until interest rates drop. This house is nice, but I want to see more options. So let's start talking about, I think one of the ones that might be most important for us at the moment, given the nature of where we are, pardon me, is waiting until interest rates drop. So I want to wait until interest rates drop. Okay. Well, I would start to sit into it and ask them the questions of, one, are you absolutely sure that they will drop? Maybe. I know that we've seen a lot of a rate decline coming up from kind of the 7% down to the 6.5%, down to the 6% so far. And the expectation and hope would be that we would continue to see some of these interest rates drop over time. Waiting until the interest rates drop is this. When those interest rates do drop, the competition of the market is going to get much higher. At the moment, over the last 10 years, interest rates are a bit higher than where they were for a long period of time between like 2014 and probably sometime in the early 2021s, early 2022s before we start to really see them increase. As soon as we do see interest rates, if that happens, come back down to a 5% mark or even a 4.5% mark, which personally I'm a little bit nervous if they do come down that low, but you're going to have a lot more buyer competition. So my question would become, are you going to be willing to forego many of the different contingencies when it comes to a home inspection, an appraisal gap coverage, or other miscellaneous criteria and have to overbid the price of the home due to that competition so that you can get a slightly better interest rate? The question I have is this. Do you have an opportunity to redo your interest rate at any time owning the home? Yes. Do you have another opportunity to own that home? No. So there's something that is flexible and there's something that's not flexible. The not flexible part is the fact that you can or can't buy this home. Now, you may wait 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 30 years for this home to come back on the market, but I can always refinance my loan, right? Refinancing, and I'm sure you've heard it, buyer, you can marry the house, date the rate. And while there's some people who like that and don't like that. That is true. We do have the opportunity to renegotiate our rate at a further point in time, right? So I would try and say, again, hard fast on the buying the house, rates will be up and down. You can refinance if you need to. And also, as those rates come down, there will be more competition and you may have to give up more contingencies. Buyer, it's your choice. But I do believe that buying when it's right for you is most appropriate because we can always ebb and flow with those other things. So that would be number one. All right, I'm concerned about the neighborhood safety, right? Well, this is a really good opportunity as realtors for us to practice our ethical boundaries of redlining, steering for our clients. Now, we are not the source to tell someone if a neighborhood is or is not safe. What we can do is call upon our experience and say, I have spoken with many other clients in the past, not giving any qualitative information of what type of client, who have had children, and many of them have decided that they would like to look at other towns. Not even going to give what those specific other towns are, just a simple framework like that. Now, I would also recommend push as much of this back on the client. Even that I felt a little funny about, right? Even doing something like that. What we want to do is encourage the buyer to be able to do their own research. Now, we don't have to necessarily say whether it is or not, but we can provide them with the resources that they can find out on their own. Personally, the easy 3 times a day drive through it during the morning, drive through it in the afternoon, and drive through it in the evening. Drive through it on the week, drive through it on the weekend. Go take a walk through the neighborhood. You can see and hear a lot of the things if you're on the ground and you're actually walking the neighborhood, right? The other opportunity would be, look, as realtors, when we start approaching other people's homes and things like that, we may be crossing some, agreement or a peddler's license. But what we can definitely do is ask them, the buyer, if they would like to go walk the neighborhood and maybe just knock on a door or two and just say, hey, we're considering moving into this neighborhood. We just wanted to ask you, like, do you like it? Is there anything, would we feel safe here? You're going to get a lot from the perception, from that reception, I guess I should say, of that homeowner. If they're a little like, why are you looking to buy here? Okay, maybe you won't feel like it was a community base and it's a safe area. Or you have somebody that's really effusive, like, oh, we love it here. We've been here for 20 years. We've known everything about it. Yeah, you got to be concerned about over in that area. Sometimes at night you get a little riffraff, whatever it is. But allow your buyer to either find resources online. Sometimes the crime map data is really helpful, but be careful because every town has a lot of little individual crime map data that comes up. So sometimes it can be overwhelming, especially from a buyer from a new area. Use some of that crime map data, use the buyer's own ability to navigate those neighborhoods. And finally, you can always call the non-emergency line of the police station if you truly do have a concern and you want to find some things out about that. Hey, Lori. Yep. So some of the other things that we want to talk to. The house needs too many repairs, right? And we have our first guest coming in for our class today. Yes. No, you're okay. It's me chatting with me and the audience who's watching the recording at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you ready to take one?
All right.
Okay. Throwing her into the fire. So let's talk about one. You're with a buyer, and I'll try and set the stage a little bit.
Okay.
You're with a buyer and you're getting into the pre-offer phase, right? We're just considering offers on the house at the moment, right? Now, the buyer and you've seen the home, you know what's involved with the house. They really like most of it, but then they come back with you and they have this, the house needs too many repairs. So again, they like a lot of things about the house. This is their one big objection that they're coming to, is that the house needs too many repairs. How do you start to broach that conversation with the buyer?
So if the repairs were, if this house is what you want it to be, maybe have we thought about approaching it with the lender to see if maybe we can get a loan that you can actually do the repairs. And because if the structure of the house is in the location that you want, and this is going to be your forever home, then a few repairs should not stop you from, from going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And at least looking at the possibilities of maybe getting a renovation loan and have all the repairs done.
Yeah, I think
it actually would be, and this way you could structure it into your mortgage.
Right.
That you're not out later on having to go out and, and you can actually throw a few wish list things in there that, you're willing to forego.
Yeah. Yeah, I think attacking it with I like that you brought it right to, and here's how I want to take this is, first, we're going to kind of do an A and B, and I'm going to give you just like an immediate feedback. I want to hear from, the other people to say like, I would also add, or I like the way you said that, or whatever it is. So we want to kind of get like a group feedback on each one. But I like the way you brought it to, well, if this is your dream home, right? We can get bogged down so much inside of just an offer. And I always tell people, don't not buy a $300,000 house because of a $3,000 issue, right? That stuff can be fixed over time. A lot of the stuff that you even have doesn't even really need to be fixed today, right? Yes, you have something that's going on. You could fix that in a year or two. It's not even something that you need to spend that money, but buyers are starting to just add, right? They're just adding all the inspection items. They're like, okay, I owe my down payment, my closing costs, and I owe all this inspection stuff. No, we can spread that out. So the fact that you brought it back to, if this is your dream home, right? We can use another product to use a renovation loan to finance some of those repairs, right? How do you feel about that?
I would say also, like, what would the house be worth after you've done the repairs? So what would you get out of it by doing the repairs? And sometimes people can do the repairs themselves.
Yeah.
And is the house livable the way it is now? If the answer is yes, you don't have to do it all at one time. Just take it one room at a time.
Yeah,
and you can still live in it.
Right.
But then look at the end game to see what it would be worth.
So focus on a little bit more of ARV, or after repair value, as we get some of these things done, and the livability of where it is today. Okay, I like that.
Can I say one thing there?
Please.
When it comes to your objections, one of the first keys would be to normalize it for them. So we want to normalize it. You ever go somewhere with a problem, and then somebody says, like, we see this all the time.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay, fine.
Yes.
Like, my problem's not a disaster.
Yes.
Because I always think my problem's the worst problem. So but for me, the first step on these objections is to always normalize and agree, right? Like, you're going to create conflict by being like, it's not that bad. Like, you could do it later. Like, they're like, well, like, I'm buying the house. It's like, no, you're right. Like, there's definitely some work that needs to be done here. But just so you know, like, probably every home you go into, you're going to find something. It's like a home inspection, right? When you do a home inspection, you're paying them to find out what's wrong with the house, not come back and give you what you want to hear. So you normalize it, agree, but then you build in that value of like, well, we might be able to get a really good deal on this house and a little sweat equity. Like, this could be a gold mine for you.
Yeah. I love the I
agree and run with that momentum.
The normalization. Humans want to be in the middle of the herd.
Yes.
Right. We want to feel like we're part of the group. So there's a phrase with Phil Jones that says, most people. You know what? Most people have a situation like that. Most people have a little bit of struggle with credit. Most people go to that. And you're right. It kind of, all right, good. They've dealt with this before. I've been making this out to be a mountain out of a molehill moment. Okay. Let's jump to a seller hesitation. And we're still staying with the more simple ones at the moment. What if the buyer backs out at the last minute? So we're going into a listing presentation. They're going through the concerns that they have. And I'm coming right to you for this one. So you're at a listing. Oh yeah, I know. Hey, throw it right into the fire. You either practice on each other or you practice on your clients. So, all right. So you're at a listing presentation and you're going through it, everything like that. And you say, hey seller, is there anything that you're concerned about as this process goes? Is there anything that's been looming large for you that I can help, uncover for you? And they come back and they say to you, I'm really worried, if we go through this whole process and then the buyer just backs out at the last minute, I'm really concerned. What would you say?
Well, I guess I would normalize it.
That's a super common concern.
I can understand your concern, and it does happen. However, we try to address those issues up front so that we don't get to that point. And then worst case, we were able to sell, get it under contract, assuming we're going to get it under contract very quickly, we would be able to relist it and get it back out there.
Now,
give them some power, right? I'm concerned that the buyer is going to walk away when we accept an offer. Okay, well, one, we're going to vet these people, like you and I together. Two, I know who the players are. So when I see these pre-approvals coming through and this other stuff, like I can tell you, I've never heard of this company. I know these people, they do it well. But two, it's your decision. Like, you get to make the choice. You're in the driver's seat here. You get to pick your buyer.
Yeah.
Right? So you're giving the power back to them.
And I also think, what is that? I make the the silly joke inside of a buyer consultation. I said, look, there's plenty of reasons why a buyer can back out of a transaction through very legitimate, through very legitimate and legal reasons. What is that thing that holds a buyer inside of a contract for a non-legitimate exit?
Money, with deposit.
The escrow deposit. I say, seller, now look, if there is truly a home inspection issue and we are unable to resolve it, well, that would only be fair to allow a buyer to not move forward, right? Well, and if the home doesn't appraise or they have financing issues, obviously we can't force them to do it. Again, we're going to vet them. We're going to go through this, and we've already done a pre-inspection of your home where we can do to help identify maybe some of those issues so we can get ahead of it. But remember this, if you have a buyer that has no legal reason to get out of this contract and they want to, well, technically we can arbitrate to keep all or majority of that escrow. You'll actually get paid by the buyer for wasting our time. So this isn't just it's a quid pro quo. Yes, they can be let out, but they're going to give us a $5,000 to $10,000 deposit. What we could maybe do is set a minimum deposit threshold for the property, right? We can set that as a minimum of $7,500 escrow required for all offers per the seller's choice, right? As a fair, we want to make sure we don't get tire kickers. I'm not going to take a $500 escrow, right? I'm just not going to do that. So I think you handled it well. Good job normalizing. I agree with you. All very good. All very good. Okay. All right. So let's jump to a little bit some of the other ones here. Okay. Oh, all right. An interesting one. Hasn't happened a ton. I don't trust my home will appraise for the list price. Now that's an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't trust that my home will appraise for the list price. So, Lori, back to you.
Okay, well, first of all, why do you think it will not?
Well, I've just heard from some friends that they had a little bit of a war story when, they went under contract, the house didn't appraise, and the deal fell apart, and then they had this appraisal stuck with their house for something like 12 months, and it just really hamstrung them from moving forward.
So first thing is the list price. We base the list price upon the current value of the rest of the homes that have sold in your area, comparable homes to your house. And an appraisal is based upon the houses that have sold in your area that are comparables. So if we're doing our job correctly, we should not have a problem with the appraisal. But let's say we do. There are avenues where we can appeal. And if it's legitimate that they were off, sometimes we can address that. We can also address it with the buyer. If they really want the house, they may put in a little bit more money, and maybe you would come down a little bit more money to meet in between. And worst case scenario, and it doesn't work out, and you have to lower your price to that amount, that might happen, or we put the house back on the market. But if the house isn't going to appraise, you can't expect somebody to pay for something that it's not worth.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something we would have to sit down and really take a look at. But if we do a really good market analysis, then we should be all right with the appraisal. But it's a common concern that most sellers have, and I understand completely. And but it does happen sometimes. But if it's done correctly, it should not happen that often.
Yeah.
Could you also offer as an option to do an appraisal? Have them pay for an appraisal ahead of time so that they would know right before they list it.
And obviously, you could send 3 different appraisers out to the same property, and they may get 3 different values, but at least you'll be within a ballpark.
Yeah.
At least you'll be within a rough range, and you say, yeah, seller, yeah. And Laura, I think the way you kind of tee that up, and we do it based on current market data, right? We're doing it based on current market data. That is a pivotally important.
I enjoy playing out their worst case scenarios with them as well, right? So if they're worried that they're not going to appraise, then let's just go all the way down that path. What do you think it will appraise for?
Yeah.
So they say X amount of dollars, and you say, okay, so we could do one of 2 things. We can list it at what I think it's going to sell for, which could also create a bidding war where you could actually end up selling it for much more than you anticipate in the market that we're in. And then if it doesn't appraise and it comes back onto you to renegotiate with the buyer, like this is the number that you're thinking about today.
Exactly.
Like we could always drop back 10 yards and punt the football. Like not everything has to be a touchdown. So if your expectation is $100,000, but we list at 120, maybe we do have to come back to this number with the seller. And maybe that's an expectation you should set, but what happens if we get to one?
Let's do it.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's try it.
Like that's a super easy one to just be like, we can always come back to your number. Let's go for the gusto.
So Jeff Glover is a very popular realtor inside of the KW world, does Glover U, his own kind of education base and everything. And he has on the MREA podcast his 5-step listing presentation. But one of the things he really talks about is that you as the agent are not, you shouldn't be the one setting that list price. What you're doing is we're running the comps. The effective market range for the properties of this value are in this range. Now, seller, what price, based on the data that I've presented to you, would you like to list the home for? Because the moment that it doesn't and they have to do a price reduction and you were the one that told them what price they should set it for, whose fault is it? It's your fault. Now, if it's the seller that helps set that price and then we do have to do a price reduction, whose fault is it then? Nope.
Oh.
It's the market's.
Oh.
Seller, there was nothing wrong with what the price that you selected based on what you believed your home was worth. However, a home is sold when a ready, willing, and able seller offers a piece of value to a ready, willing, and able buyer. Well, it's that willingness part that we've obviously fallen short of. We haven't had any willing buyers, and we know through statistics that the first 2 to 3 weeks of your listing period is going to be the highest amount of traffic through your home. And so it's the market that's telling us that, hey, that valuation wasn't quite correct. And so we're going to do a heavy price reduction down to a much more effective market price that's then going to be able to get our buyers in the door. It's either, it can be either your fault or it's always the market's fault. It's the market's fault why it didn't go the way it is. It's not yours as the seller. It's not mine as the agent. Okay. All right. I like that one. All right. So let's jump. All right. I want to jump to a little bit of an investor concern. You want to do that or you want to do an inspection concern?
You're not so.
I think we're
thinking about investors.
all right. Well, let's do some inspection ones because I think inspection ones are common. They're very popular, right? All right. So, okay. How about we do a simple one? This is again a fairly simple one. So we've gone through the home inspection and we actually got some fairly normal stuff back. Nothing's too crazy, but we got a 26-year-old AC unit and a 26-year-old HVAC heater unit. They complain, Denise, we really like this.
Are you the buyer or the seller?
I am just teeing up the problem.
Okay.
This is going to be for a buyer and you. You're the buyer's agent. I'll be the buyer, right?
Okay.
So I see what you're saying there. I twisted that. So we went and we had the home inspection, 26-year-old HVAC units. Okay. So I'm presenting to you and I'm coming and complaining, Denise, I like so much about this house. Most of the other inspection stuff, it seems like it'll be fairly easy to navigate, but man, I did some research and a full new HVAC system with a 3-ton AC unit, condenser. I mean, I could be looking down at $12,000 to $15,000. I mean, these units are just really old at the moment. I don't know what to do. What would you say?
Well, I mean, I guess you could go at it a couple different ways. You could, offer to go back to.
So I'm going to stop for a second. This is you live answering a buyer. This is live answering, right? So I am the buyer. Talk to me.
Okay. Well, I understand your concern. That is an age for an HVAC system that is down the road. There's a couple options that we could do with that. We could request money be set aside from the seller to reimburse you for a new HVAC system. If we go back to them with half, or we could also request an inspection on the HVAC system itself from a certified HVAC dealer to see what condition the system's actually in, and then go from there.
I love the idea where you begin with, we have some options, right? I think that's always so powerful. There's not a yes or no.
It's not like this is the end.
Correct. It's not a binary decision. We have a spectrum of choices to choose from. Yes, we can request money for a credit, but let's talk amongst ourselves. How often are we able to get any form of a credit to an operating but old HVAC system?
I just had this happen.
Okay.
So, and I had the listing and I also had both sides. And the buyer was like, they came in, did home inspection, was 22 years old. It was in townhouse from Independence. And I was like, whoa, I can't, I wish they made them like that nowadays because you can't get one for 10 years, let alone 22. But, we asked the seller to buy, 2-year home warranty.
That was kind of where my head was going.
And he was so happy with that. It cost them, I think it ended up on the townhouse, it was like $300 a year. And so it was really cheap. So it was under,
Yeah.
it was under $800. And they bought the 2-year warranty and everyone was happy.
Yeah.
That's good.
I always like to talk to people too. I think the warranty one is probably that's that middle ground that they go to.
Yeah.
But I tell people all the time, I said, look, let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen a 1960s Cadillac still driving around? Sometimes yes. I mean, because what is it? Well, people take care of their cars. I mean, we have people who buy a car and don't maintain it, and it goes dead in a couple of years because they never did an oil change, and they're wondering why it's smoking every time they drive the thing.
That means they take care of the house.
Like any piece of mechanical equipment, is the rest of the home in a condition where we believe they've taken care of it? If no, then I think your concerns are legitimate, and we definitely should push for heavy home warranties and things like that. Maybe a home warranty regardless. But if we're seeing that the rest of the house is spotless, everything is super well maintained, it looks like that filter was just put in the other day, well, it probably shows me that they do maintain the mechanicals of the system pretty well. I still think a home warranty would be effective for us to do it. And, if it helps, we can even run a little cost scenario of like, okay, well, if we were to do a home warranty, how long could we maybe get out of it? What would that be in an annual cost versus what a replacement cost? Do we just start a small little put away money for that replacement at some point to help defer the cost? But I think where you kind of went with, we have options, we can try and get some money, we can try and do a warranty. I think those are going to be kind of the covering most bases for an HVAC system. Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, you guys ready to jump to some slightly more complex ones? Because these have been some warm-ups. These have been some easy ones. Okay. All right, so this is a little bit more qualitative than quantitative. I want to buy, but my partner and I have different ideas on budget and location. So I'm a buyer. I'm the husband, right? And I have my wife at home, and I'm chatting with you, the realtor, and just getting to this point. I'm like, look, we really are interested in buying, but we are just not on the same page right now with how big of a house we want, and honestly, where we want to live. It feels like there's so much information right now. We're just kind of stuck on where to go from here. So, Lori, how are you handling that?
So maybe, it's very important that you guys pick something that you both going to be happy with, and something that's going to work for both of you. So it's really important to figure out what would work and what's most important for each one of you, and maybe there is some common ground there.
Spreadsheet.
A spreadsheet, yes. And then maybe start looking at both of your wishes, and you might sometimes see that the other person and even yourself may like something that your other half prefers, and it might be something you both agree upon. But let's see how much common ground we can get together, and put together a list and take it from there.
What about our budget? Location, I guess we can do that. Like, she works here, I work there. We're going to try and find the middle-ish that, so I don't have to drive more than 40 minutes. She doesn't have to drive more than 30 minutes. We'll try and keep that from a location, but we're just really split on this budget thing.
Well, budget's really important. So, and not always what you qualify for is what you're comfortable buying. So, and that's a conversation that the two of you both need to be very comfortable on. But you also need to sit down and take a look at what's going to also cost you. A lot of factors can be your commute will cost you more money to commute into taxes, what it's going to cost to live in certain areas, and you might figure that some of those things will set off some of the budget on that. Some homes you might be able to go a little bit higher on than others. Some homes have well and septic. You're not paying a sewer and water bill. Some homes, you're not going to have to send your kids to a private school. So we can take a look at some of that stuff too.
Okay. I like that. What would you add to that? Right there, Ben. Budget and location. Because location those are probably the two.
Yeah.
Do you ask them like, well, how far off are you on budget? I mean, what's our spread here?
That's a great point. Is that we never got to like how far, I mean, are you looking at $100,000
Right.
1-bedroom condos and you're looking at $500,000,
Right.
5-bedroom, 3.5 baths with 2 acres?
Right.
How far off are we? You're
Right.
right. And I think, when you come back to the budgeting conversation too, I like what you said because I say the same thing is that you're going to get qualified for one price, but then what you really is talk to your lender.
Tell people all the time, I'm gonna qualify you for mortgage payments you're not gonna wanna pay.
Yeah.
So, the best thing when it comes to budget is get them to your lender and let them just get them estimates, because the idea is, on my side, after the initial conversation, to make sure that there's no giant gaping holes, is get to numbers. It will clarify everything for everyone like that. It's one thing to look at $400,000 homes. It's another thing to finance them at 6.5%. So you would be surprised at the sticker shock that in the last 18 months we've been seeing when clients come through for financing. And part of our job is to keep them gung-ho. We want to keep them positive, motivated, excited to buy a house. We want to send them back to you where they're like, oh, hey, we got our pre-approval, let's go. We're super excited. That sticker shock that was very real right now. So getting them to that lender quickly and then having that lender get the numbers very fast. And you should be working with a lender whose mantra is numbers. Like a pre-qualification letter is one thing, and that's what you need. Have they seen the numbers though? Like the itemized, this is a bottom line industry. Your seller wants to know how much he's going to make. Bottom line. He doesn't care how you get there. That's your job. My buyers want to know, what is my payment? How much is it going to cost? Right. If that payment is within their threshold and they're super excited about the house, I can give them 12%. They don't care. It's a bottom line industry. They're going to live with that payment.
That's why they've been selling cars many years.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so let's come into a little bit another more complex one here. So I'm getting conflicting advice from my family on how to price this home, and I don't know where to go. So now we're starting to get the peanut gallery, and everybody's.
This is a very real problem because
Yeah.
family members drop bombs in these transactions quicker than anybody else.
Okay.
Dad comes in
Yeah.
and it's over.
Home inspection?
It's
right.
over.
Dad's there?
So all right, I'm gonna tee this one up if it's okay with you. So where I would start with this conversation, especially if you're starting to get, and it could be family, but it could also be friends, other neighbors, everything like that. I said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to just take a timeline of events, and it's going to go back from the oldest family member in your family and when they bought their first home, and we're going to plot each of one of those. Now we don't have to do this in actuality, but let's just think about this for a second. You're getting advice from your dad on how to price your property, and the last time he bought and sold a property was 24 years ago. Okay. You're also getting some advice from your aunt. That was 8 years ago. You're also getting some advice from your sister, and that was about 4 years ago, right? And that's the last time that they actively engaged in any type of a pricing or real estate conversation. So, well, let's think about the markets that they were in. 24 years ago was 2000. 8 years ago was 2016. 4 years ago was the beginning of COVID. The market we have today isn't the same as the market and when they bought. The strategies upon how we go about pricing a home, given the market, is different today than it was for them. Now, not to say that the information they are giving you is incorrect. We just don't know if the information they're giving you is relevant to the market that we're currently in today. So, seller, what I want to remind you is that irregardless of the market that we're in, the very first thing we do is we take a hardcore numbers approach to getting to a bottom line of what your home is worth based on comparable properties that have sold in the area. Now, you live in a cookie cutter townhome development. There are 62 units in this development, and we've had 6 home sales in the last 6 months. The range of those properties is between $340,000 and $385,000. We've looked at your property. We've gone through the different pluses and minuses of what the 385 had all the bells and whistles. The 340 had a non-updated kitchen. They didn't have that new HVAC they didn't have. And we've understood based on, sometimes general appraisal guidelines or pricing guidelines, what all of these amenities mean to you. Now, we may have a small range and you can self-select within that range. But if you're starting to get a family member that's telling you to price over 400, why don't we bring them in? Let's sit down. I understand that I'm asking you questions, you're trying to relay that to them, and then they're giving it back to you and giving it back to me. Have you ever played Whisper Down the Lane? You think that we're actually going to get an accurate conversation if we keep doing this? Invite your aunt, invite your sister, invite your mom, whoever it is, or dad, to sit down and I'm happy to answer the questions and the thoughts that they have. what I find a lot of time is they just want the best for you.
Yep.
And I get that.
Yep.
And I also want the best for you. I actually have a signed agreement with a fiduciary responsibility where I could lose my license and be out of this job for a year if I don't do exactly what's best for you. And at the end of the day, we can price it here, we can price it there, whatever. My goal is to get you the best buyer with the best terms in the best amount of time for you to net you the highest amount for this property. Everything I'm doing is exclusively in line for that. So we're going to go through the numbers approach again. If you'd like to invite that family member in to discuss, I'm happy to have them sit at the table with us, and I'll present the same information to them so that they feel informed, because what I'm feeling is you have 4 different people with 4 different sets of data all trying to solve the same problem, and you're not using the same data to get there. That's why we're having such conflicting results.
Great.
Okay.
I've got that situation actually right now with
Oh,
with
really?
a property where all the siblings are involved.
Mm.
And it's mom and dad's property, they're getting older, it's time to sell the house, and all of the siblings have different ideas of what the house should list for, like by like $100,000 difference. And it's trying to reel them in, but I do like the idea of bringing them all together. I just
Most scenarios,
You got to be really good. You got to be really good at trusting yourself to navigate.
yeah.
so most scenarios it'll be one person.
Yeah.
It'll be dad,
Yeah.
or mom,
Yeah.
or uncle, right? A lot of times it's an uncle, it's a realtor, something like that. I'm adamant at that point that they get involved.
Yeah.
So here's the number one reason that I have found that my qualified buyers, or people that should legitimately be selling a home, let's talk listing side, exit the process, is they don't have the stomach for it. And the reason they don't have the stomach for it is because this shit is stressful.
Mm-hmm.
This is a stressful process. I don't care how good it is. Like, it's a monumental number. It's the biggest financial transaction that they're going to make. A lot is at stake. When dad comes in and starts throwing the blowtorch to everything, we got to get him in. We have to. We have to be adamant about it. I would stop it at that moment. Well, my dad, hold on, Ty. Can we get him on the phone?
Yeah, these are sellers. They're
Right.
sellers.
Well,
And-
yours is unique because it's so many people.
And the parents are like,
Mm.
you guys take care of this. You're
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
sell it, so you guys take care of it. So now all of the siblings are coming together to take care of it, and I've kind of given them the comps and everything, and said where I think it could land, and one's up here, one's down here, one's there. None of them are on the same page, so it's like.
There's another part of that too, where it starts to become combative
Mhm.
when we're not trying to compete against the seller for the price that we want. We're trying to be on the same side of the table, round arm with them, and move them forward together. So a lot of times in those situations, the other family member thinks that you're trying to win one over on their family member, and they feel like they need to stick up for them. If we can get on the same page and just say like, well, guys, what is the goal? I don't have any goals in this transaction other than to help you achieve yours. What is the goal that both of you have for the transaction? You may actually find out that the dad and the daughter, or the dad and the son, or whoever it is, they actually have different goals for the sale of this property. Some just want it to happen as quickly as humanly possible, and others want to maximize the price. I am going to price this home very differently if you have different goals. And so first off, are we even on the same page about what the goal for this is? Can we just first get on the same page about the goal?
Yeah.
Because when you have the same goal, the strategy is fairly simple. It's a model, right? It's a model on how we're going to approach that. You need to be out quick. Yeah, we're going to price at the lower end of the market because we want to drive it in quickly and we want to get a price. You want to absolutely maximize price and you're willing to wait a good amount of time. Yes, if you understand that the longer we sit on market, you may actually fall down. But if you really want to try it up there as much as you can, I get it. I still am going to recommend a more middling price, because when you're the only buyer, you're thinking pure logic. But when there's, and we know this, right? But when there's multiple buyers, I get them to start acting emotionally. My goal as an agent is to make your buyers emotional. I want them to bid up beyond what a logical person with no other competition would do. And to do that, I got to get multiple buyers in here. So actually pricing it up at that 384.9, that's actually not going to drive the right traffic in here, because you're like, well, we'll be okay with 375. Great, if you're good with 375, let's go in at 370. Let's go in at 365. And let's let somebody feel like they're getting a deal, but then we got a couple buyers feeling like they're getting a deal, and they'll bid it back up to that 375. And seller, just a reminder, you don't have to take any price. Now, in good faith, you do want to sell this property, but even if you receive an offer over asking price, you're not obligated to take it, as long as they have to meet your terms, and we'll make sure that happens.
And you can always ask them, are you comfortable with them driving this car? Because if they are, they can just get in the passenger seat. I'll connect with Dad, and him and I will figure out what it is that's best for you. And sometimes they're like, yeah. I mean, I had a transaction where Dad came in 2 weeks into the process. I mean, it was the inspector, the agent, me. I mean, he knew somebody who was better than everybody that was in the transaction. And it got really, really hairy, really, really quick, to the point that I exited the transaction. Where I basically was like, listen, I'm not the guy for this. This is like very chaotic. I can give you referrals. Your dad has somebody who's better than me, so I would probably suggest going that way. Because I can't do all of this. I just know that it's gonna blow up. It's gonna be a disaster. And I don't want to attach my reputation to something that somebody, I mean, I worked with them for 45 days, multiple offers, multiple homes, multiple weekends. We go under contract, approval, appraisal, all done, title done. 2 weeks. We're closing in 2 more weeks. And Dad came in and just boom. To the point where I was like, I can't associate. It's like, this is insanity. Like, these are young kids. They're standing in the corner like this, and Dad's in front of them, like, rah, rah. I mean, to the point where people were like very offended. Sometimes you just got to cut and go. And what happens? Small issue with the septic, turned it into a molehill into a mountain. The whole transaction blew up. He's writing online reviews about people.
Oh,
Yeah. Sometimes you do also have to have, as a realtor, you have to have your walk away. You have to have your ability to walk away at a certain point. I used to tell people all the time, I am not a taxi driver. I do not have to take anybody who steps into my car.
Yeah.
It is my choice from every meeting
And
with every.
never let the client play intermediary.
Yeah.
Never let them play intermediary.
Yeah.
Because they're just going to come back to you stressed out every single time with questions that they don't understand, and you're going to give them answers that they can't relay.
Yeah.
And it just creates so much conflict.
Yeah.
Like, bring them into the transaction and do it in a joyful, accepting. I would love to hear your dad's input.
Yeah.
I would love to hear it. You know, I'm sure he's got a lot of wisdom about this. Let's bring him in. Let's coordinate together and make this happen.
You know where that shows up so much? The home inspection.
Yeah.
Right?
all the
Right?
time.
And I at first I started having some issues with it. And if I speak with Fiona, she would laugh at this because it became the entire thing. Was we had a dad it was the husband's father, and he was like had been handyman this, he had every trade job at some point. I don't think ever really made it in any one of them. He may. I'm not trying to cast aspersions here. But anyway, the home inspection, and we're going through the report, and he's being like, well, electric is, do you know how much electric is per hour, son?
Yeah.
And I'm like, why don't you tell me? Because you obviously want to tell me a number. Well, it's this. So you guys are requesting this and everything like that. And we really had and I learned from that. I said, you know what? In the future, instead of, again, being combative with this dad, I'll start talking to the buyer and I'll say, hey, we're going to be at that home inspection for 3 hours because my inspection is thorough. If you have somebody in your family that you've been talking with a lot about the transaction, bring them to the home inspection. Have them be there. And I know my home inspector is a stud, runs an inspection school. He's one of the best inspectors I've ever physically done an inspection with. He's amazing with them. And so I allow this really qualified. I'm like, I'm not necessarily qualified, but he is, and he's on my side. Yeah. So I'll let the dad ramrock right into him and be like, well, I'm concerned about this. And Joe will be like, well, let me educate you here a little bit on this. And then the dad's like, oh, no, actually, you know what? Yeah, I have heard that. Yeah. All right, we are at 144. I want to get into our ultra complex bonus round, and then we're going to wrap up. So we'll do 2 of these, and then we'll break. Now, there's a couple pieces of information in this. So you're going to have to do a little bit of kind of keeping up with something. I'll remind you if there's a piece of it that you want to do. So I'm going to use this first one, and it's a buyer-seller financing complexity. I want to sell my home and use the proceeds to buy another, but my buyer's financing is shaky and I'm worried about my contingent offer falling through. I'm also considering taking out a bridge loan, but the terms are unclear and I don't want to be stuck with 2 mortgages. Lori, where do we go?
All right, so I understand completely what you're talking about.
Okay.
So I did this.
So I have, buyer financing is shaky on the one I'm selling, and then the property is, considering taking out a bridge loan to just continue to make them work.
So you're working with the buyer. I'm working with.
I would say
I'm working with the buyer.
Well, I would say because I want to sell my home and using to buy another. So you're being a selling agent and a buyer. Yeah, you're not dual agency on the same transaction. You're just seller buyer representative. Yeah.
Okay. So I understand completely what your fears are because The thing that may end up happening in your scenario that you're thinking about is having 2 mortgage payments at one time. So that would be something we'd want to make sure that didn't happen for a very long time if it had to happen at all. But we can try to make that not happen. And there are many ways that we could do that. So first off, we can when we accept an offer on the house, once we put your house up on the market and we accept an offer on your home, a strong offer. We're not going to accept any contingencies, and we're waiting for them to sell their home and buy, or we would have a problem. So it cuts down the likelihood of the deal falling through. Plus, I want to work with a qualified. I want to know the lender. Or get them approved by one of my preferred lenders to make sure that they're a strong buyer, and we'll have and make sure that we're not going crazy, that, if it doesn't appraise, you do realize you will have to maybe come down on your price a little bit if it's a higher offer. So with all of those going forward, with the home that you're purchasing, your lender, if your lender needs to be secure in the fact that he or she thinks that they'll be going through with whatever profits we have from the sale, we can schedule it to be the same day or the day after that you will have the proceeds. You won't have to do a bridge loan. But if you do have to do a bridge loan, then that's something that a bridge that you can cross, and it is done. And but your lender will be able to give you facts, pricing, and exactly what's going to cost you to do that. And hopefully it won't be for long.
Okay. What would you add to that? Yeah, I want to kind of hear.
A good agent will know their products. A great one will know their guidelines, right? So you can modify those statements to say, listen, my lender offers a bridge loan. The fees are nominal. It's 1% of what you borrow. You do not make a payment on that loan for the time that you have it. The payments that are required are interest only, and they're financed. They're not out of pocket. You don't have to worry about floating the expense for that bridge loan. They also give you 4 months. So in the event that your shaky buyer could potentially fall through, we have plenty of time in the open market to find another buyer. We might even have some other offers that we could go back to and see if they're still on the table. But in addition to that, when you buy your next home, if you close in December, you don't pay on it in December. Your lender defers January. You don't make an actual payment until February. We have a much longer extended period of time than you might realize, where you won't be saddled by these 2 mortgage payments. And if the worst case scenario happens that your buyer falls through, that bridge loan that you're taking is going to give you plenty of time to find a new buyer. Now you hit them with tons of specifics.
Yeah.
Tons of specifics, and that's just a very top level overview of like what a bridge would do for them.
Yeah. That deferred payment where you're right. If I'm closing in December 12th, your first quote unquote payment is going to be February 1.
Yeah, and we don't make you pay on the bridge. So let's say and you can just tell it, the bridge is 9.99%. It's interest only, and it's good for 4 months. So if you take $100,000 and you have $500 worth of interest payments, when you pay it off, you're paying off $100,500. So it's nominal. Like, these aren't crazy make or break numbers. And then the other conversation I would have with them is, when you're accepting offers, are you willing to take less money for a less contingent buyer? Because we might just find our flexibility in the price that you're willing to accept. Your top dollar might have a laundry list of contingencies, but they're top dollar for that reason. Your lower price point, no contingencies, no appraisal, maybe it's a cash offer.
But in this scenario, though, wasn't it just based on the financing?
So this deal was buyer's financing is shaky. So
it wasn't about contingencies, or it was about whether they're actually going to get approved for their mortgage.
Yeah, my buyer's financing is shaky.
Argument is the same. They still have the bridge loan for 4 months.
You have time.
You still have time.
Yeah. And the other part becomes, did my offer that I presented into my home that I'm looking to move into, did I add this is contingent upon my home sale clause, right? I don't know. And the other part that I would be a little concerned about here is the buyer's financing is shaky. To me, that seems a lot of did we as the listing agent vet that buyer and vet that lender appropriately? Are they at max pre-approval status? Were they at 5 points above qualifying credit score? Did they only have, 3.5 months worth of reserves in their bank account when we did all this? Well,
It's actually a good real world one because where you end up is where you end up. And sometimes you kind of walk yourself into that quagmire where you're 2 weeks into the process going, okay, we're now realizing buyer's financing is shaky.
Yeah.
This is like 50-50.
Yeah.
I'm getting communication from the lenders and stuff that this isn't adding up right. So now you can say, okay, we know what the reality is. Here's our contingencies. And maybe your seller hasn't actually made that offer yet. Maybe there's a home that they're looking at, they haven't made that offer.
Right.
And if they have made the offer, then you just have to go with what you work with. But again, you want to normalize that for them and then give them the real details. I don't like anytime that I can send somebody off with a firm answer without deferring back to you, like just go confirm that, right?
Mhm.
I would rather just lock it down right then and there because they want that confidence from you as well.
the only other point, and then I want to go to our last one here, is that when you have domino transactions, realtors want to work together. It's the wrong thing to do is to recluse, go into hiding and trying to solve this on your own. And then the day before bring something up like, oh, by the way, not sure if we can close tomorrow because of a situation we've known about for 2.5 weeks. And this is the first you're hearing about it. You have no idea the person you're buying. They may say, let's just do a 30-day extension.
Yeah.
Let's just extend. Give you guys a month. It's fine. We like your terms. We like your buyer. Are you willing, if we do it,
for my buyer?
if you're willing to do a 30-day extension, are you willing to pay us potentially a prorated monthly rent or cover our carrying costs for that month? Yeah, absolutely. I'll pay your mortgage and utilities for 1 month just to give us a 30-day extension that you had no reason to give us. It doesn't cost the seller anything. It might delay their plans a little bit. Depends on what they have to do. But communicate, over communicate. All right, last one, then we'll wrap up. And Mark, you can join in on this. We're doing a complex objection handlers.
Oh, I'm complex and objective.
I know you are. All right, I'm recording this, so be on good behavior.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so let's do this is an interesting one. It's kind of two separate issues, not overly connected, but it kind of goes into together. I'm in the process of buying 2 properties. What a luxury. One for my personal residence and one for investment, right? So you're kind of handling 2 different property issues simultaneously. My lender flagged a potential legal issue on the title of the investment property involving an unresolved easement, which could affect my financing. On top of that, the other property is in a historic district, and I'm concerned about restrictions on renovations I want to do immediately after the purchase. So we got one, which is a investment property, and there's an easement issue. And then the second one is I'm buying potentially a historic home, and I'm all of a sudden concerned that I'm looking into some information that I might not be able to get what I want to get. So complex, very much like probably some of the stuff we should have addressed earlier, but let's say for whatever reason we hadn't, we picked up the client quickly, we jumped into this stuff quickly, great, you want to buy 2 houses, of course I'll help you. And then all of a sudden we got a title easement issue with the investment property and we got historic concerns on the primary property. What are some of the first frameworks that you would want to start? And maybe do you want to split these? Because I think you almost have to handle these independently of each other.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the investment property easement issue. Where do we start? Where do we start with that?
Title and attorney.
Yeah. Title and attorney. All right. So this is not only an objection handler of what you do, but you have to dictate this like you would if we were the client sitting in front of you. So go on that in terms of let's address that
What
easement
would I
issue.
say to my client?
Yes.
I would say, all right, so this is an easement issue. It has to do with a survey. It has to do with legal. And as I told you when we first met, that those are 2 items that are above my pay grade, and yet I will hold your hand through the entire process. Let's contact attorney XYZ, the one they've already hired, and review our options with them so we know exactly what our choices are and where we can go with this.
Yep. You're bringing in your partner and you have options and I'll help you.
Yeah.
A very simple
That's a
framework.
great answer because you're not an expert in everything, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
I'm not an expert at
that's-
that.
Yeah, and defer to the experts.
So I think that is pretty straightforward. Yes, an unresolved easement, we do need to do this. Now, I had a situation just to do this real quick before we finish the historic one. I had a property, it was on the water. Well, there was an easement issue with it was built out farther than it was supposed to. And we went through and the buyer was like, we want a reduction of $30,000 on the sale price of the property. It was only we had it listed for 150. They were under contract for 180. They wanted to go back to 150. We said, no. And we're not going to resolve the easement. We're not going to do it. Now, I was the selling agent. I was like, you sure you don't want to handle this easement? Like, it's probably going to come back and bite us. He goes, Connor, watch. We're going to go back on the market and we'll get a cash offer. I was like, I don't think that's the right choice. What happened?
happened?
We went right back on market. We got somebody who was doing a cash offer and he got his title company to say, yeah, not a big deal. We're fine. We'll take it. Sold it for 175 cash.
Mhm.
It happens, but I was like, let's go talk to the attorney. Now this guy does massive multifamily stuff, so he knew what he was talking about. But all right, so let's just go back to this historic district one. Now this might be one of those things where you didn't realize there was a historic district in a section of town, or you were like it was a kind of newer, maybe not newerish house, but it was like right on the line of where the district was. So you're just finding out about this when you're under contract. So again, on top of that, the other properties in a historic district, and I'm concerned about restrictions on renovations, I want to do immediately after the purchase. Where do we go?
Check with the county, or check with the
Yeah,
district that it's in.
again, this is something we need to go and we need to see exactly what your restrictions are. I will, we can find out exactly what you are able to do and what you aren't able to do. And see if it works for you.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna start with a question. Mr. or Mrs. and Mrs. Buyer, I'm curious. The work you wanna do on your home, is it inside or out? Because we might be blowing up a whole big thing and they wanna fix everything inside, and you can do anything you want inside.
Right. And let's think about it. Like, I'm concerned about restrictions on renovations I want to do. Well,
It
first
doesn't say.
we have to figure out what renovations do you want to do,
Yeah.
right? If it's
So-
swapping out the appliances, like, well, no, that's not going to be an issue, and I can help you that
And
too.
listen, you might wanna gut it to studs.
Right.
That's okay, you're not outside, you're not affecting the historic street view of the property. So is it an interior thing you're looking at, is it an exterior thing you're looking at, or is it both? Because if you're gonna look to keep the house on the outside looking the same, you're gonna stay within whatever the guidelines are for the outside of the house, then we don't need to do anything, you're fine. If you're concerned in the future that you might wanna do something on the outside of the house, then we need to have a conversation with
Yeah.
the town
Yeah.
and all that.
And this is a simple, what do you want to do? Here are the restrictions. Let's figure out the ones that are black and white that we can and can't do, and anything in the gray area, I'll absolutely help escalate that to
Yeah,
the
and-
chairman of the Historic
and then
Preservation
obviously-
Society,
Works.
Yeah.
If it's outside the house.
and let's just work through this together and,
Right.
go line by line. Okay. All right. Well, that's it for I'm getting like a little nap around me. That's it for our objection handler. Was this helpful?
Yeah, definitely.
I think that playing out these scenarios, we talk so much about scripting and all these
I
things.
learned a lot about the original.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so much.
All right, everyone. Good stuff. Have a good day. Bye.
Long.